Does government destroy progress?
Ah, yes. Okay.
There we
So
go.
does government destroy progress? So the spirit of this question came to me as I was sitting on a 737 in the airport after a connection for several hours, children, and I was exhausted. And then I was sitting there on this plane and I was thinking, they made 737s in the 60s and we're still using them. It's the same kind. I mean, I know we've made new ones, but it's the same plane.
Yeah, new ones that like break and crash and cause
Yeah,
Boeing to go under. But yeah, we do make
exactly.
them.
We still make them 737, 747, 7 whatever. All 60s. We're still using them. Um, uh, I've got a lot of things on this. I actually cracked open the old faithful Free to Choose book.
Hey,
Me.
From Uncle Milton. I'll share some things about that here in a minute. But yeah, like I just thought, man, this is crazy. Like we developed in the 70s, we developed commercial airplanes that traveled at the speed of sound. The Concorde, the one that they had in Britain, they used it until 2003, I think, and it traveled at Mach 2. So the average commercial plane right now goes 550 to 580 miles per hour. Okay, Mach 2 is 1,500 miles an hour. So that stupid flight from like Indy to like Tampa, that's like 2.5 hours, would be like 40 minutes or something. Like, it's 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 insane to me that we've gone like almost 60 years without any true technological advancement as far as the public being able to transport. Because the government's been using planes that go this fast for that whole time. And I know Midnight Mark has some stuff about the railroads and stuff too, all that thunder. But does the government, does it hurt progress? Does it slow things down? Midnight Mark, let's go to you.
Yeah, so it's funny that you asked this I forgot you asked it a couple days ago. I had the exact same question today in a little bit longer form, so I'm glad
Just a
man,
little.
you dumbed it down. My thing was, okay, so I saw a thing this morning that showed that Dubai in 1981 was one skyscraper. It was a Toyota plant. And in 40 years, Dubai is what it is. So places like Shanghai and Dubai are much more technologically advanced than New York, which would be like our most technologically advanced city, right? So it's clearly the case. It is clearly the case because in China they have the high speed monorail system
they
that
do.
they showed it that somebody mapped it out in the United States. You could get from New York to LA in like 2 hours on
No,
the
it ain't that fast.
or
That's crazy
three
fast.
hours or
You know how
something
that
like that.
you know
But
how they're funding that, right? From the U.S. Treasuries. Fun
social
fact.
Yeah.
credit
It's
system.
a no, it's a fact. They're funding it from the U.S. Treasuries. Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah,
So,
they,
but my point is that, and you guys can get into it. But I look at that picture, and this is what my initial thought is: look at our COVID package. We gave billions of dollars to other countries. Those countries and those cities are not giving it to New York. They're not giving it to other countries. They are taking their tax dollars and their labor and pumping it all into Dubai, all into Shanghai, all into all these other places. And what do? We don't give it to New York. We don't build a high speed rail system that can get you to New York to California and however super fast it would be. We give it to them. And so yes, I think the hard answer to this question is 100% yes. Because why do those countries with our money look like that? And I'll be honest, New York kind of is garbage compared to those places. So go ahead, Piano Man.
Actually, I want to kind of get JBM's take real quick because I kind of have a curveball.
Okay.
okay. First of all, I will completely acknowledge that we are talking about progress specifically in terms of transportation. So maybe that should have been more of the question, but maybe Peterman's going to take us somewhere else. But okay, so I'll
No,
just
actually, I'm
share.
not. I'm gonna actually
Okay.
stick with the transportation.
Okay. So, all right. So I'll try and keep this as brief as I can, but I went back and reread a chapter earlier today in this book because I remembered him talking about this. So he talks about how the Interstate Commerce Commission just like destroyed railways. So railways were all over America. There was transcontinental lines. There was tons of them, more than you could count. There was more railroad in America than the rest of the world combined, allegedly at the time. And but what happened was there was free trade. There was free competition, and so like there would be certain rail lines that had only way you could get from like Harrisburg to Pittsburgh. And so they would charge like crazy fares, right? And so the consumers were mad and they would complain about it. Of course, the railways, especially when it came to shipping stuff for companies, there was competition and they would make like backdoor deals like, no, we're all going to charge this. But then they were given secret rebates. It was a whole thing. So then the ICC comes in and they say, okay, we figured this out. Like you could literally travel from like New York to California for cheaper than you could take these really short trains because they had this monopoly on it basically. So here's how the government decided to fix it. They said, you know what, you guys are right. We need to charge the same amount for the really far trip too. So they just jacked the rates. So then they came in, they did the same thing to the trucking industry. So as this happened, the trucking industry took off because there was no regulations. Well, then they formed this new commission in 1935, and they were like, "Hey, you have to have the certificate of convenience to be able to do this." So they took 89,000 applications like the day this happened. They only approved 27,000 of them, and then by 1974, it had dropped to 14,000. Like it just kept dropping how many companies actually had access to do this, right? So then the same thing started to happen to the airlines. The Civil Aeronautics Board came in, CAB, and they killed the competition there. They were like, hey, there's certain rates, you can't go below this number. It can't be cheaper than this. As you can see, the consumer is always the one who is paying. They're always the one who's paying. But they made this new rule. So in California was big enough. They could have airlines that operated just in California. They didn't need to fly to other states. So you could fly from like San Francisco to LA and it was way cheaper than what the cab had put into place.
Yeah, same thing for Texas. That's how Southwest started. It was just a Texas airline.
Yeah, hobby. Yeah. So anyway, so then CAB comes in and makes a ruling and say, hey, you actually have to charge the same amount that we're charging. You can't charge any lower. And they took this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was like, yeah, we agree with that, which is crazy. So again, consumers paying. But then just to touch on what we already said already, right? I mean, we are still flying in airplanes that are more or less traveling at the same speed people could travel by flight 50 years ago. Like that is absurd. In the railways, especially, just building on what he was talking about, the high-speed railroads go an average of like 120 to 160 miles an hour in China and like Japan and France. I mean, literally so many other countries. Our limit, there's a rule that a train can't go faster than 89 miles an hour, but none of them even get there. Many of them don't even reach 60. The average speed is like 39 miles per hour on a train. Like that's crazy. And it's to me, it's because the government stepped in and basically these people who owned these companies realized, hey, the government can help us. And that's why the airplanes are somehow not as nice as they even were back then, right? The trains are the same way. The trains
Can't
are
smoke on
trashed.
them anymore.
Well, I mean, think about like
Lame.
old movies, right? There was a dude playing a piano in the middle of the airplane. Like there was nice, but now like first class just means like you get an extra 6 inches. Like it's crazy. So anyway, this is my take. I definitely think the government is heavily involved in why we don't have these. These are just like practical things. Like if you really could jump in a train and travel. Like I could come to Atlanta in like an hour and a half if I jumped on, or 2 hours or whatever. If I jumped on a train, that's huge. That's like life changing. But instead, that ain't it.
Yeah. So I definitely don't disagree from an economic standpoint that the government makes the consumer end up paying more. You'll have zero arguments from me there. Now, what I will, what I do want to ask you guys here though is, I'm not sure that progress is necessarily defined by who has to pay or anything like that. So progress has to do with the technology, and you talked about how we're traveling at the same speeds we were, right? That was essentially your point. What is it? Well, is the purpose of government to actually make technological progress? I
No,
think
but
no.
no,
So if
no,
it's no, no, let me keep going here. So if
Okay.
it's not for progress, what is the purpose of government?
You tell me.
It should
I
be for
mean-
the welfare of the people,
Right.
Would you
Yes.
disagree or agree with that?
I
agree.
would agree with that.
Okay. So the reason why the answer to this question is that government hinders progress is because it's for the welfare of the people. I think it's due to safety regulations that they hinder, or just for the general welfare of the people. They're slow to change things because if something works, they're going to keep it. If something has a risk, they're not going to allow it. If there's like a 1% chance of a virus spreading, they're going to make you stay indoors all day. Like obviously, they don't look out for your best interests. They're looking out for the interests of the total population. So
Well-
that was my answer as to why government hinders progress.
Well,
So,
one of the things I'll say on it is I don't mind when there is some type of government regulation, as in your train or your plane has to work or something. I mean, I guess I can understand why there would be some body out there that says before you can charge people. Well, what makes me sick is the thing that JB was talking about, how they said, oh, well, you can't charge under a certain amount, and they're basically telling companies what they're allowed to charge. And
Yeah.
like he said, it goes against the consumer. So I'm not against the government coming in and saying, hey, you can't fly people on a plane that's maybe older than 20 years or something, or you
They
have to
wouldn't do that.
well, no, I know. I don't know the specs. What I'm saying is I can understand why they would create safety regulations like, hey, you have to show where your plane has had a 750-point inspection and it passes all 750 before you can put people in it. But you can charge them $50 a ticket if you want. It doesn't matter. That is a problem.
The problem with what you're saying though is every single thing they did to stop the trucking industry, to stop the railways, to slow. They did it all under the guise of safety, and we're going to make your life better. And then it turns into some rich dude over at Boeing greasing some palms, in Congress. Hey guys,
exactly.
let's just keep doing the same way.
But let me ask you this, guys. Okay, if the high-speed rail system is more efficient than planes, it's cheaper in all regards. That's why a lot of these countries are going.
I mean, it's not cheaper in all regards. It costs a lot more to build a high-speed rail system than it does to build a plane.
It's more practical, and if more people would get on it. Like, I don't fly very often, but if I had a train that I could hop on and take a stop to Indy and go visit, or go to Atlanta to visit you, I'd probably visit you more often because I could do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
I disagree. But then the issues are it costs a lot of money to build, and so you're only going to get it in big cities.
my question was,
there are
why?
still issues around it.
Why would they not do this?
They are
when-
going to do it from Dallas to Houston is going to be the first one. I think we talked about it a little bit on this podcast actually, but it's in the works. It's not like it's not coming.
It's just incredible. We've literally been trying to do this for 50 years. I'm pretty sure Gerald Ford was president when we first started talking about high-speed rail lines. I'm not kidding. I was reading an article about it earlier. That is crazy.
Wow.
But I do want to say, I do agree with Midnight Mark. If you're going to have a government, it should be there to regulate industries, not from a monetary or economic standpoint whatsoever, in my opinion, but purely from a safety standpoint. So, the reason we have seatbelts is because of the government. And Milton Friedman does have like a whole argument about that, but I kind of actually disagree with him. That's one of the few things I disagree with him about. But
Dude, seatbelts are insane, but we could talk about that later.
yeah, we'll talk about it. But I do think that if you're going to have it, it should be there for regulation and to protect the people that are under the government.
I agree.
And when they get involved in the economic side, they're not protecting the people.
Well,
So
and we've talked about this a lot. Like the government, and I think most of us agree with it. Tell me if I'm wrong. I've been wrong a lot when I say most of us. But I think we kind of agree that the government is kind of there for like having, making an army and protecting the citizens and making sure there's at least some type of well-being established. But what they're not supposed to do is kind of tell us what to do and how to spend our money and what to do with that kind of thing, especially if you're in a full capitalistic like we are, right? But the problem is that is exactly what they do. It's like you said when we talked about the Communist Manifesto. We already do half the things in it. You know what I mean? Like the government already does like half of what Karl Marx wanted, but they let us have our own money to some degree.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I agree. I think the government can be there to basically say, don't let people fly in your plane if your plane doesn't work. But charge whatever you want.
But at the same time, like, if there was I agree with you. If the government is going to exist, that it should be doing, right? But at the same time,
is your argument going to be it'd be better with no government? I mean, I don't disagree with you there either.
Well, I just specifically with this regulation, right? So like, all right, so I go jump on Southwest or United or American, right? And they've got a 99.99999, survival rate or whatever it is, which I guess that means you should wear masks. I don't know. But anyway, so let's say I go jump on, Midnight Mark Airlines and I have like a 25% chance of dying. Guess which one I'm not going to get on? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I don't disagree.
I think that the market
right, but they would have to get to that
regulate
statistic at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the fair point. Right? Like the
yeah.
government doesn't want 25%.
The government
of the
doesn't
people
want
to
us to
die on a airline. That's the balance, right?
I mean, I agree with you. If 1 out of every 4 of their planes go down, but do you want to be on the Southwest plane before the statistic gets published? I don't think so, man.
Right.
But at the same time, right? Like Southwest is not going to. They're not going to put planes up there that have I don't know. I just feel like
it's
something
bad for their business.
But
yeah, it would only be something in the very, very, very beginnings of an industry that would ever be an issue. And then after that, it would straighten itself out really
before we
fast.
wrap it up, I mean, basically it's like this. The electric car could have been around in the 80s, but it took until
it could have been around in
when was
the
the first
30s.
Tesla? 2010. So, or yeah, you're probably right about that. But like they were making electric cars in the late 70s, early 80s, and the government and big gas killed it, right? The big problem is, like you said, old boy at the Boeing company has a lot of money and they own the government, and that stagnates progress just as much as everything because there's no competition.
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. Jeff Bezos right now. This is a little off topic, but they're giving Jeff Bezos like a $10 billion buyout right now. And meanwhile, this dude is trying to buy MGM for $8.5 billion. Like, what are we doing? I mean, it's stupid to even ask questions about it
We
anymore.
got to not talk about this because I'm going to throw up.
It's incredible. Anyway.